Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last webinar in Bioinformatics Annual Fall Market Intelligence Series, Pricing Research Essentials for Life Science Go-to-Market Strategies. I'm Keely Trull, Senior Marketing Manager for Science and Medicine Group, and before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. First, if you experience any issues throughout the broadcast, please feel free to put them in the chat and I will work to help you fix them. Second, this presentation will be available on demand after the webinar has concluded. An email will be sent to you with information on how to access that. That email will also contain the on-demand link for our previous two webinars, Unlocking the Power of Market Research for Life Science Product Development and Harnessing Competitive Intelligence for Effective Life Science Go-to-Market Strategies. We hope you'll consider watching those sessions on demand. Third, we have a lot of content to cover today, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please put those in the Q&A and we will follow up with you after the webinar has concluded. Leading today's discussion is Damika Williams. Damika is the VP of Market Intelligence at Bioinformatics. Damika, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Keely. As Keely mentioned, this is our third and final session in our fall webinar series. Overall, in the series, we've been discussing the types of data and information you need to develop an effective go-to-market strategy. If you attended one of our first two sessions, you've seen this slide before, so I won't spend too much time on it. But in general, a go-to-market strategy is really a roadmap for successful launch of a new product or of new features for an existing product. Developing the strategy starts with everyone involved, all of the stakeholders, really being aligned about the problem the product intends to solve. And once everyone's aligned, we need to start gathering information. So we've discussed in previous sessions about identifying the target audience, addressing market demand and the needs of the target audience, or what we refer to here as market fit. We've also talked about assessing your competition and possible distribution channels. So the last piece of the puzzle is determining the appropriate pricing strategy for your product. Next slide, please. Historically, our life science industry has utilized a cost-based approach to pricing. So cost-based pricing focuses on what it costs to produce a product. The most popular way to implement that strategy is what we call a cost-plus approach. So cost-plus pricing is relatively simple. You just take the total cost of producing the product or service, and that includes the production, storing, distributing, selling, marketing, all of those costs, and you add a fixed percentage of what you expect the return to be. And this approach has been really popular because it gives you predictable margins, and it's pretty simple to implement. However, we are seeing a transition to value-based pricing in the industry. As the name implies, this pricing strategy is based on the target customer's perceived value of products or services. Unique and highly valuable products like those that come out of the life science industry may be better positioned to take advantage of this pricing model. So if your company has selected this approach to pricing, you'll need to know what your customers' values are and how they relate to your product offering. This approach has become increasingly popular because the focus here is on data-driven pricing decisions, and that allows for custom pricing strategies and also allows you to adapt and be responsive to the market and to your customers while still turning a profit. Next slide. So we're going to talk about pricing research essentials. You can go to the next slide, Keely. So pricing is all about assessing the market environment for your product. You'll need data and information about your target customers, the problem your product is solving, and its various features. And then also you want to know what your competitors are doing. All of that information will be synthesized and used to develop insights about how those key elements relate to each other and how they affect the overall market, and therefore how you should be pricing your product. Next slide. When assessing the market environment, you'll want to track a few key indicators. Industry trends being the first one we'll talk about. So you want to regularly review industry reports and publications and stay up to date on industry trends and advancements. You'll want to adjust your pricing strategy and take advantage of new and developing trends in the market and how that can increase the perceived value of your product. With regulatory changes, work with your compliance and your legal teams to anticipate any potential changes that may affect the way your product operates or your product development process. You'll need to adjust your pricing to accommodate any compliance costs and work to still remain competitive. And sometimes, if you haven't addressed that in the beginning, having to fix that on the back end can be really expensive. So that part's really important. Engage with your R&D and innovation teams to understand how the technology can impact your product's pricing. You want to utilize innovative features to justify any premium pricing and really show how your product is different from others in the market. Utilize your market research techniques to assess size and characteristics of your target segments. So that can come from secondary and primary research. As I mentioned before, if you're looking at reviewing industry reports and publications, you have all that secondary data. And then if there are any gaps that those secondary sources don't cover, you'll want to do some primary data collection to assess, like I said, the size of your target markets. And you want to tailor your pricing strategy for different market segments based on their size, what they value in the product, and their willingness to pay. Next slide, please. When you're assessing your product as it relates to pricing, you'll want to collaborate with your product development team and understand the technical details and the benefits of the product as a whole and also of each feature. You'll need to determine how each feature really influences pricing and customer preferences. Engage with your customer feedback sessions. I know, when you're developing, if you are a startup and you've already gauged your target audience to figure out what their perception is of the product's value, that needs to be done on a continual basis. And you'll need to evaluate how the unique selling points contribute to the pricing differentiation and also to your customer, how it attracts your customers. Utilize your market research techniques, as I mentioned, primary and secondary, to assess how pricing aligns with the perceived value. And so you want to make sure that your pricing and your messaging aligns with what your customers value most. For life stage cycles, you're going to monitor industry benchmarks to determine pricing strategies based on the stage of the product. So if you are developing a product and you may have like a baseline product and then you're going to continue to add features as you go and re-release the product with additional features or additional capabilities, you'll want to be able to adjust your pricing strategy accordingly. So leave some room for that when you're planning out your product life cycle. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about our customers, one of the things we really need to do is segment to market. Your customer base is not homogeneous. They have different needs based on what they're doing with the product, how they're using the product, what segment they're in, whether they're in academia or if they're with a biotech company, or how they're using it and how they're able to access funding to buy your product. So you want to use data analytics tools to segment the base effectively, and you'll customize your pricing strategies to cater to the unique needs of those segments. Create buyer personas. Work with your marketing teams and develop those detailed buyer personas. You may pull in your sales team as well to help with that. You want to align your pricing and your messaging and your overall strategy with the motivation and preferences of your specific buyers. With price sensitivity, you can conduct surveys. The next section we'll talk about how to measure price sensitivity and gather those insights and what to do with them. But you'll want to look at your customer preferences and what they're willing to pay. And then you want to set prices that match the price sensitivity for each of those customer personas or your market segments so that you can maximize your revenue. In terms of customer preferences, you want to implement some pricing experiments. You may go out to people in the same target with 2 different pricing and see where you get the most traction. You can develop different tiers, or you can bundle to figure out what is the most valued features for each of your customer groups. Next slide, please. Last but definitely not least, you need to consider your competition. What are your competitors' pricing strategies? Use some tools to monitor those changes in their pricing, and make sure you're adjusting your pricing strategy so that you can differentiate your pricing and still remain competitive. Look at a thorough assessment of your competitors' websites, review their marketing materials, any product documentation that they have, and leverage your unique product features to justify your pricing as it compares to your competitors. Highlight all of those advantages. This is a time when it doesn't really pay to be humble. Say why you're better, be direct about it, and use some research to help you assess which messaging would resonate best. Engage in maybe some mystery shopping. Sometimes you can have internal resources to do that, or you can work with external firms to gain some insights about your competitors' pricing tactics. Make sure in your messaging, you're emphasizing your strengths and your value proposition so that you can have premium pricing. Attend industry events and conferences so that you can stay informed about recent competitor developments and also competitors that are entering the market that you may not have known about. Position your pricing strategy to capture market share and target those specific segments. Next slide. Now I think, if you join this session, this is probably what you're joining for. We'll take a look at a few common pricing models that can help determine optimal value-based pricing. So the Van Westendorp is a price sensitivity meter that really uses inputs collected through a series of 4 questions. So those 4 questions are, at what price would you consider that this product is priced so low that you would question its quality? So it's too cheap. If it does all of these things and the price is this low, then I'm concerned that it's not a quality product. At what price would you consider this to be a bargain? So it's a great value for the money. So it's cheap, but it's still a good product, and we feel like we were getting a deal. At what price would you consider this product to be starting to get expensive? It's not out of the question, but you need to give it some more thought, or maybe even get some additional approvals before you could purchase it. And then finally, you're trying to assess at what price would you consider the product to be so expensive that you just couldn't even consider purchasing it. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the results could look like once you have done this type of analysis, Van Westendorp analysis. So the price perception, it really helps you identify how potential customers perceive the price points. This insight really guides your pricing strategies and help those align with customer value perceptions. So the optimal price range, sorry, I don't have a pointer here, but the optimal price range that you see on this slide is the acceptable price range that provides a clear boundary within which pricing decisions can be made. It really ensures that the pricing is set within a range that resonates with your target customers. And then price testing and sensitivity. So by evaluating the different price points along the curve, your business can assess how sensitive customers are to changes in the price, and then choose a point that maximizes positive perception and minimizes a negative perception of your product. And then your market entry strategy, this really informs that because it assists in determining whether to position the product as a premium offering or a value offering based on your customers' perceptions and how they view the quality and different price points of the product. Next slide. So some of you may have heard of conjoint analysis, and may not know too much about it. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this, and then I'm going to walk through a case study where we did conjoint analysis and show you what the outcome of that was. So conjoint analysis is really a statistical research technique that helps you understand how customers perceive the value of different attributes. And then you'll also look at, once you see the perception, how does that perception or these attributes influence their purchasing decisions? So it really helps businesses determine the optimal combination of features, and then you can kind of leverage that with the cost of adding those features, and then the price they're willing to pay for it. So the benefits of using this particular model is that it's a really customer-centric pricing point. So conjoint helps with crafting pricing strategies that align with customer preferences, thereby increasing the likelihood of acceptance and adoption. It's segment-specific pricing. So by understanding the preferences of your different customer segments, you can tailor your pricing strategies to cater to the various customer needs and their willingness to pay. Conjoint analysis also reveals how customers perceive the value of different features and attributes. So you can do optimal feature bundling and aid in creating more effective bundles and strategies around which features would be offered together. With a competitive advantage, you can fine-tune your pricing model based on your customers' preferences. And so you can differentiate your product by offering what they value most and maybe what your competitors are not offering, so that you can highlight that and gain a competitive advantage. And lastly here, one of the biggest benefits is maximizing your revenue. So the conjoint analysis assists you with identifying the sweet spot of your pricing that really optimizes the features and the revenue generation while also meeting your customers' needs and expectations. So on the right-hand side, I've kind of outlined the process for creating this model. So basically, you'll set up, you'll ask the customer or potential customer in your target audience to select certain attributes that they are most important to them. So medical and life science industry products often have multiple attributes that contribute to their perceived value. These attributes could be factors like product efficacy, their safety, ease of use, the reputation in the industry for the brand, and things like that. So conjoint analysis helps in selecting the most relevant attributes to focus on when you're developing your pricing strategies and also when you're developing your marketing messages. Attribute levels and scenarios. So we present the customer with different attributes and scenarios. For example, in the case of like a medical device, levels of attributes could be different sizes, materials, features, compatibility with other technology, and then a conjoint analysis would construct those scenarios that present respondents at their respective levels. So participants would rank or choose their preferred scenarios, and that would reveal their preferences in a real-life decision-making context. So you could see how those members of that target audience would actually perform. Because it's one thing to ask questions about, do you think you would do this, or how do you think you would perform? But in a conjoint situation, you present them with the situation and ask them to actually carry it out. And so it's no more about like what they think they would do, but what they actually do. The next part would be data connection and analysis. So collect all the data from the participant choices and their rankings, and we analyze all of that to determine the relative importance of each attribute. And then we use various statistical techniques to help quantify the trade-offs customers are willing to make between the different attributes. This is vital in understanding the perceived value and the perceived attribute or feature combinations, and help you really figure out how to differentiate your product for those different personas and customer segments with the pricing. Step 4, deriving utility and price sensitivity. Conjoint analysis results in utility values for different attribute levels. So these utilities represent how much value a customer or a potential customer assigns to each attribute. By linking these utilities to price points, you can assess how changes in your price would impact customer preferences and customer actions, customer buying behavior. So this insight really guides your pricing strategy to reveal the price range that would align best with your customer preferences. And last but not least, scenario simulation and price optimization. So when we do conjoint analysis, we will add all of this data into a pricing model or a conjoint simulator so that you can kind of play around, and if you change the attributes, you can see how that would change the price sensitivity and your customer's willingness to buy. So I know that was a lot of information that I've covered relatively quickly. And so again, like Keely mentioned, if there are questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll make sure we answer them. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the data would look like at the end of a conjoint. This is very high level. There'd be a lot more information used to help pull out insights, but this is just an example. So we'd measure price sensitivity based on different segments. We'd measure their share of preference, the utility of each of the attributes or features, and the importance of those attributes. I'm going to walk through a case study where I'll talk about this a little more, but this is just kind of an example of what the output would look like. Next slide. All right, let's talk about a case study. So this case study that I'm going to walk through we had a client come to us that wanted to optimize lab instrument features, and they wanted some pricing attached to that. What would be the optimal pricing? So we recommended and we performed a conjoint analysis. So a little bit of background. It was a life science company. They wanted to introduce a new lab instrument to the market. It promised breakthrough capabilities, and they aimed to uncover the right mix of features and pricing that would resonate with their target audience. So the goals were to identify the ideal combination of features, the optimal price point that would maximize their customer preference, market share, and profitability, and then assess the price sensitivity of customers. So in the end, they wanted to find that sweet spot of the features with the cost of implementing those features and what their customers were willing to pay. Next slide. So the methodology, of course, was the conjoint analysis. The key factors that we measured in terms of attributes were what were the factors affecting customer decisions? Was it the resolution, sensitivity? We looked at speed, ease of use, and accuracy. Different levels for each factor were defined. And then we came up with various pricing scenarios that we presented to the target audience to assess their willingness to pay. We did this through an online survey. We used our science advisory board. Our science advisory board is a group of just under 40,000 scientists who have agreed to give us their opinions and thoughts on things happening in the life science market. So we worked with people who had relevant organizations and job positions. We narrowed our focus to North America, Europe, and China. And then these people that we asked to respond to the survey were in the research discovery, analytical development, process development, or had some QA/QC responsibility. They had to be performing analytical test methods and had to have some influence on purchasing decisions. Next slide, please. So what happened here? So once we did that analysis and came up with what I kind of showed you on the previous slide with the 4 charts. We found that the group was highly sensitive. They were high sensitivity was a priority for them. The instrument needed to be very sensitive. We found certain customer segments, and we were able to pinpoint the personas of the people in those segments really wanted greater pricing. They have really sensitive to pricing, and so they placed a significant importance on affordability. And then the respondents were willing to pay a premium for instruments that offered enhanced sensitivity up to a certain price hold. So we were able to determine that sensitivity would be the discriminator, that would be the differentiator. That's what they were not getting elsewhere in the market that they would be willing to pay top dollar for. So we were able to advise our clients that if you're going to invest in additional features, make sure sensitivity was high on that list. And then they could, if they were able to implement that, they could charge more for the instrument up to a certain amount. And so what happened at the end was that the instrument was crafted, developed, and tailored to specific customer preferences. They strategically priced the instrument, accounting for the value that customers attributed to those features and aligned it with pricing expectations. And then they positioned their product as a high value solution at an attractive and competitive price point. Next slide. You can go back one, Keely. So if you had any questions, this would be a good time. I do want to go back. Keely, can we go back to the slide with the charts? So as I mentioned in the case study, this slide is what we would have presented to our clients. So we would have shown them the pricing sensitivity, and we've taken out a lot of the information because we need to, keep the anonymity of our client, but we have shown them the price sensitivity, what features of the product drove that price sensitivity, and that's where we came up with the sensitivity, right? So a high sensitivity instrument, they could charge more for. If for some reason they chose not to implement that level of sensitivity in the next round of in their feature development, then we gave them specific price points of that they could most put out to their audience and still be profitable. So if there are any questions that were in the chat that we could answer relatively quickly, maybe Keely, I could probably take one or two.
Don't have anything at the moment, but if anyone wants to put anything at the chat into the question box now would be a great time to do so.
Okay, you will, like Keely said, you will receive this deck. You can go ahead and download it. It's in the handout section. There's also information in the back about bioinformatics, science and medicine group. My information is also there if you have any additional questions and you'd like to contact me directly. Feel free to do that. If you want me or someone on my team to do a presentation to your team of any of these 3 things that we've talked about or any other life science market research topics, we are happy to do that just to introduce you and your team to the topics. We can assess feasibility for any kind of projects that you're working on, and that's all included in an initial consultation. We do not charge for that, so feel free to reach out to me directly or add your question to the question chat and we will get back to you. That's it for me, Keely.
Great, thank you, Damika. So this is going to conclude all the time we have for today. As Damika mentioned, if you have any follow-up questions that you have not gotten to put in the questions chat at this time, you can reach out to Damika directly. Her information is on this slide. You can also reach us at info@bioinfoinc.com. As mentioned, a PDF of the slides from today's webinar can be found in the handout section of your control panel. So I'm going to keep the webinar line open for a few minutes, so anyone who wants to download these slides from the handout section will have an opportunity to do that. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.